Hello and welcome to today's webinar, 2020, the year construction embraces process automation. Thanks for taking the time to join us. My name's Stuart Parkinson and I'll be your host for this morning's session. I'm delighted to be joined by Paul Stone, Product Strategic at FlowForma, and James Morgan, Director at Ishango. With 27 years experience in the IT industry, Paul is a highly accomplished IT professional who is the go-to product expert from both a business and technical perspective. Paul works closely with FlowFormers, supporting them in the delivery of FlowFormers business process management tool, helping organizations automate and streamline their business processes. Meanwhile, James is a highly experienced and respected IT expert who has delivered significant technology projects in the UK across SMEs, blue chip, enterprises, central government projects, and most specifically in construction. His most recent position is as IT manager on the A14 IDT project, the largest road construction project in the UK. Together, Paul and James will analyse some of the stats from our latest construction report and share tips on how you can best embrace process automation and accelerate digitization. Recently, Construction Online and FlowForma surveyed over 200 key decision makers in the construction to understand the current digital mindset of those in the industry. From these results, we created a report featuring the survey statistics, which is available to download from your resource panel. The report examines the current challenges construction are facing, how technology plays a key role in the response to these challenges, and the desire in construction to broaden digital capabilities. So if you're ready, gentlemen, I'll pass control over to you.
Okay, thanks, Stuart. Hi, James. So we're going to go through the survey and just talk about the different survey points. And the first one up is challenges in construction. In which of the following ways do you feel that the pandemic has affected your business processes? Well, I guess it's no surprise that the leading one there is difficulty engaging with external parties. I guess during this difficult time, a lot of parties, if you're interacting with them on paper processes, for example, you're going to have difficulty passing the information to and from the parties. It's often very difficult to get hold of them and so on. So yeah, it's not surprising that that's come up as a leader, and also the restricted communication capabilities with staff and customers. Again, it's really, if you're dependent on paper-based processes, you're going to have difficulty executing those processes. So it's not too surprising, but it can be solved. It can be sorted out by using a digital process platform. And what that means is that you're recording information on forms and passing that information between all the people in the process instantly, and remotely as well, without any paper being transferred. I don't know, James, what would you feel on that one?
Yeah, hi Paul. Good to chat to you again. It's quite an interesting one. I think it's when you look at the construction industry in general, it's a little bit slow to adapt and change. They like to stick with processes that are tried and tested and have worked for years. And I think that's probably where the pandemic has kind of broken that chain. So you don't necessarily notice those problems until we went into lockdown. And certainly I've seen it with the guys that I work with on some of the construction sites where the pandemic and the lockdown has meant that suddenly it's highlighted some of those processes. They break if you're not face to face, which they're used to on a day-to-day basis. So yeah, I think it's certainly been a challenge, I think, particularly for the construction guys.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I was speaking to a guy at Forest Research there who said that if you have a paper process, you have a broken process right now, because basically that paper's not shifting, that paper's not moving anywhere. So
yeah, and I think you've got to be mindful of the fact, haven't you, as well? It's you're building these jobs, people are scattered far and wide quite frequently, and it's the engagement with the supply chain that can be pretty key, and that quite often relies on face-to-face interaction. That's what they're used to doing on a daily basis, and suddenly that's removed, that's out the door, it's no longer allowed.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I think that's really where a digital system can come into play, because if you're basically communicating, via a tool that allows you to pass all that detailed information, electronically to somebody else who might be in a remote location, I think that's something that really, really helps. And just a little plug there for FlowForma, it gives you this ability called Engage that allows you to interact with your suppliers and your clients and pass information to and from people very quickly and easily, without having to have paper involved in that transaction. So yeah, definitely it's something that we're seeing again and again with construction companies come to us saying, we need a replacement for paper now. Our processes are stalled, our projects are being delayed, and so on. So definitely, it's something that people are looking for. I think in general as well, in construction, that like you were saying, James, is basically, you need to have, because people are working out on construction sites, they're not working in head offices, they're not, they're widely dispersed, and even without the current pandemic, you're going to benefit massively from having a kind of digitized process platform that actually, people can work off their tablets, work off their phones, and transfer information really quickly and easily.
I suppose, like I was saying earlier on, Paul, I suppose that's back to my first point around the fact that it's forced that change. It's forced the hand of change in some respects of things that people maybe weren't too aware of. They were working as they were working previously, and this has really changed that arena quite a lot.
Absolutely, yeah. So on our second point there, we have, if I just switch over there, this strive for digital. So, like, to what extent has technology played a role in your organization's response to COVID-19? Well, I guess that ties in with our last point quite well, because what you've certainly seen, and as you were saying there, James, that basically you've really seen a push now to digital transformation. People are realizing, hey, digitized processes, digitized forms, that's the only way to go, because you're stalled unless you do that. So really, technology, it really is allowing your business to continue on with the minimal impact in a kind of pandemic situation. So I think that's reflected here in the stats, where technology has allowed us to maintain business and recover quickly. 88% of people said that, and that's certainly true. I think very much in construction, because of the fact that people are so paper-based, and as they move away from paper, your digital maturity improves, and it plays a big part in your ability to carry on and minimize the impact of disruptive events like the pandemic, COVID pandemic. So James, I would imagine you'd be something along the same thoughts in that area.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, I suppose giving you a kind of real world example of one of the things I've seen is working on an infrastructure job, which is quite a linear scheme. Obviously, with the COVID-19 restrictions, you're very much looking at people working in isolation and keeping distance from people. So digitization of processes means people, they can stay out in the field at the coalface, so to speak. They don't need to be actually coming back into the office. So it makes a significant difference.
Yeah, of course. So something now I didn't think of so much is that you don't have to, you don't have to be so close to people. So it's not just the removal of paper; it's literally the physical distance. You maintain the physical distance. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I think improving the technology is I say crucial to your business since the pandemic. I think it absolutely is. You've got to move forward. And I think what we're seeing in construction is a big push to move to digitization, to move to digital platforms, and get rid of the paper.
And sorry to interrupt you, but I think on that second point there, we obviously got 88% with the business to recover quickly. I think that's quite key. So, nowadays with cloud-based solutions and no-code solutions such as FlowForma, that rapid mobilization is key and probably didn't exist 5 or 8 years ago. So it's really changed the arena a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's changed a lot in the past 5 to 8 years, and the kind of technology that's available today is really very different to 5 or 8 years ago, where you can have that solution that's actually mobile, that's digital, it can be deployed quickly, so you can actually react very quickly to situations like the pandemic. And it's interesting to see as well the kind of technology that's being used today in construction. I think it's a staggering statistic to see that 90% of the survey respondents utilize Office 365. I think that's incredible. And it's fantastic to see that level of adoption within the construction industry. It just shows how much the construction industry is changing. Because for sure, I think I'd be right in saying that 5 years ago, or sorry, let's say 2 years ago, even 1 year ago, that statistic wouldn't be nowhere near as high. So it's very impressive to see that large figure on top there.
And I think you've hit the nail on the head there, Paul, in terms of timings. That's probably in the last sort of 24, 18 months that's really taken off. And people are leading down that road of Office 365. And obviously the pandemic has increased the usage of Teams and the necessity for people to be able to collaborate more in a kind of cloud-based solution.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And it's interesting, the statistic on Teams as well, being so high as well, that people are using Teams more and more. But one thing I would say is that they're typically using Teams as a phone service, in my experience. A lot of times they're using Teams for to make calls or have, maybe a video call with somebody or a video call with a few people maybe. But at the end of the day, that's just a video call. I think Teams is a fantastic application, and you know what? It's got so much to offer. People don't realize just how much it can do and how much it can help with people's productivity. Like we've got a Teams application that allows you to integrate your business processes and your data capture and all of that inside of your Teams environment. So you're not just having that phone call, you're actually recording the output of the phone call and then passing the work on to the next person to contribute into it and so on. So you're actually linking that activity on Teams but productivity, and you're achieving a business goal by having that phone call on Teams or by accessing Teams. So it really kind of benefits to make that Teams conversation, if you like, more productive by linking it into a business process that achieves a business goal. So I think that's so critical. But it's really fantastic to see that level of adoption in construction of these kind of core key technologies that facilitate kind of collaboration.
And I've backed that up as well, Paul. I've certainly got experience of engineers moving more towards Teams. So, tablets out in the field, being able to access data, shared data between, their collective teams and so forth, using the app, which, again, 12 months ago, that probably wouldn't have happened. But the COVID and not needing to be close to each other, going back into offices and so forth has really emphasised that fact and I suppose driven them down that road.
Yeah, it's great to see it. So we move on there to like the motivators for change. So what motivates organizations to move processes online? And this is an interesting one. That 69% are motivated by the need for mobile and paperless processes. Now we know in FlowForma that mobile is critical to construction. I mean, it's simply the case of people are dotted around all over the place. Most workers are not in a head office. They're out there on site, and the sites are remote. And they're often spread out over a large area. So naturally, if you're going to digitize your processes, you got to make them mobile. You got to be able to access them via a mobile phone or a tablet, or it's not having a kind of desktop application that's literally suited to an office desk. It's just not going to work. So it's great to see that the mobile systems are more available now. And it's not surprising, I guess, that we see such a high percentage interested in mobile processes. I guess that, James, you would have seen the same thing happen, that mobile is quite critical to the projects that you've been involved in.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple of elements to them. At a high level, I suppose you can look at it from a mobile. If you've got processes on mobile, there's less movement across the site, which from a health and safety point of view is always a good thing. People don't need to move backwards and forwards for collecting data and processing data. And then I suppose another key factor on that is the fact that data is becoming more and more important to the construction industry. You want real-time statistics, near real-time data, as opposed to lagging data that may be end of a day or end of a week when paper-based forms are collated and collected by somebody. So yeah, it's definitely a key driver, I think.
Yeah, I think so. That ability absolutely to collect the data while you're on site at the moment, and then report that in a dashboard back at head office, or even out there while you're on site is becoming more and more critical. I think that probably leads on to one of our later points. Let me just see there if we go on to the next one. Maybe not this one, but just to talk about that, what percentage of your organization processes are managed on paper, email, or Excel? It's quite staggering that, it's 51% there are talking about, having processes managed on paper and email and Excel. And in this day and age, really, you would have thought that people would have moved forward. But if you're working off paper, email, and Excel, it's very inefficient. There's so much room for error that you can not collaborate very well, and then if something's recorded incorrectly in that Excel spreadsheet, that thing they're using for control, then you've got to ultimately you're going to end up with delays and lost revenue and so on. So really, to be managing your business on Excel at this stage is something that's actually very risky. And there's so many other systems out there that can do this in a much more structured and ordered way, and a much more accurate way as well.
I was just going to say on that point, Paul, I suppose there's a couple of elements to that, isn't there, as well? I think there's also a little bit of a fear factor of moving sometimes. So you've got something that maybe works for a business at the present moment in time. There's maybe a lot of invested knowledge or knowledge in that process. And it's taking that process and taking that knowledge and moving it to something else. And obviously, you've got the risk when you do that migration of that dissemination of information to the person that's developing it for you. So particularly if you look in a more traditional way of, taking a process and building, say, an application to it, you've got that involvement of business analysts and IT and interpretation of that information. I think where a no-code solution is powerful is that you take that knowledge and you give them the tool, and it's in the hands of the person that knows that process inside out. I think that's quite key.
Yeah, absolutely. And we would have seen that as well, where you empower your kind of people on site to actually build the business process themselves. Really makes a difference, because the thing about it is there's the building of the process, which traditionally would have been something that IT would have done. You may not have IT resources to do that. You may not be able to afford the IT resources to do that. So what these no-code solutions do is let the business people, the engineers on site, to actually build out the process themselves, and do it quickly too. And the system as well allows you to create a prototype, a draft, if you like, of the process. So you can get the draft done very quickly, get it out to the site workers who are actually carrying out the processes. They can feed back any kind of barriers to adoption. What does that mean? Well, the drop down doesn't work, or whatever. The little bugs in the system that are always there that are very irritating and stop you using it, right? You can feed those back and get them changed and get them updated and fixed very quickly. Again, by the site engineers or whoever who configure the process in the first place. And it really means that it's much easier, a much smoother process of getting those processes built. So the paper processes transfer to digital format, and getting the processes adopted by the workforce so that you can get the return on your investment of time and money. So it really has changed things, this ability to kind of configure your processes, your solutions by the people who actually use them. Is a real change, all right. Yeah, absolutely. You're not so dependent on your IT department or suppliers.
I was going to say, from my own kind of personal experience as well, in kind of real world, working as the IT manager and heading up an IT team, one of the things we found that people liked the concept of digitization of processes, and it went really well, but we were almost too successful, because then we became the bottleneck for obviously releasing things, because, as you say, we have a finite budget and a finite number of staff that can actually process these. Moving to the no-code solution meant, like you said, we could obviously put that power into the hands of the people that truly know the process and know what they want. And then we would just maintain, almost, I suppose, like an umbrella. So we have an overarching view of what's going on to maintain control and maintain standards. But, changes and creation was very much in with the users at a business level, as opposed to us at IT being the bottleneck for the creation of these things.
Yeah, it's interesting. So IT kind of became the helpers, the advisors. So IT would advise the business users as to how to build the things themselves. Would that be fair, James?
Yeah, I think the way I'd probably describe the way we've worked using these sort of solutions previously is we're kind of like the gatekeeper. So we give them a relatively free rein, maybe in a UAT environment, let them build, let them create, let them develop. But we're there to set standards and principles and govern it, and then govern the release of it. And also, like you say, we're the champions. We help, we promote, we train, we pass on knowledge. But very much, let's empower the business to move things forward.
So on the next one there is preventing overruns. Now overruns are the nightmare of every construction project. You're constantly trying to manage your resources to ensure that the project doesn't overrun, because that's going to cost you money, etc., etc. So do you believe that project overruns have impacted your organization in the last 12 months? Well, yep, quite a lot of agreement there. So I think with overruns, of course, overruns can be caused by lots of reasons, but you'd be surprised at just how many of those reasons are related to processes breaking down. And processes break down largely because of communication problems, and again, the paper dependency and all that. It ends up being inaccurate information passed between people, or delayed communications and so on. So if you implement a digital process solution, you're getting those communications instantly, and also the data in the communication is validated, it's checked, so that basically it's right when it lands in the hands of the person you need to talk to, like your supplier. So by implementing a digital system, you're speeding up processes. You're also making the processes more accurate, so that they don't pass back, they don't loop around between two parties, because it was right the first time. Okay, so that ultimately reduces the delays in your project, because your processes are becoming more efficient. I don't know, James, would you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, very much. I've certainly experienced that myself in the past. I think, I suppose construction generally, because of the fact that it's paper-based, I'll go back to some of my earlier points, it's a lot of this is around the data. So any KPIs and metrics and measures that you have in place, if you're dealing with paper, you're generally dealing with KPIs that are lagging by a certain period. What we've certainly experienced with more and more automation is kind of the ability to be able to react at fairly short notice and actually have sight and visibility of problems within the process. That, I guess, like I say, ordinarily, to your point, someone might miss a piece of paper, it wasn't passed over, put on someone's desk. If you have an automated process, you can see at every step where something is transitioning through that process, and you have the ability to firefight, to react quickly to that, rather than look at a KPI that tells you you've been failing for a period of time because the data's already a month old by the time you start to look at it.
Oh, it makes such a difference if you can get that information like up to the minute, so you can make a decision there and then. That, like, you might solve one delay at that point that has actually has a longer term impact, because as you know, if you delay one task in a project, that can roll on to another delay, another delay, another delay. If you catch it quickly, stitching time saves 9. You can basically cut out a lot of subsequent delays as well by solving the problem sooner. So having that up to the minute data really makes a difference. Sorry, James, go ahead.
I think another point on that, Paul, as well, is around the fact, and again, sorry to keep mentioning data, but obviously an automated process means you have control and there's that level of definition within that data. So obviously you can guarantee that everybody is working off of the same set of data, whereas paper-based processes, quite frequently, it's open to interpretation of the individual that's completing it, and then by the same token, it's the person that's interpreting that data at the end when they try and amalgamate that data. So, automation, everybody has the same set of data.
Data is everything, and analytics at the end of the day is having a big impact on construction, the correct use of analytics and so on. And analytics is only good as the data that you feed into it. So getting the data right up front is critical, and getting it recorded quickly and accurately to feed those analytics really adds enormous benefit, because the analytics, if you have them right, can make a big difference to how you run your business. So yeah, I totally agree with you there on the data. Getting the data right is so important. Yeah. So in terms of, we looked in the survey at the barriers to change. So what if you're not using digital processes right now? What would prevent you from moving processes online? So the first one, top of the list here, although they're fairly low numbers, is 27% no budget to start a project. Now, what I'd say here is that, first of all, you'd be surprised at how little revenue you need to put into this to kick off a project like this. But I guess there's a bigger thing to say here, and maybe James, you could talk about that in terms of the budget aspect of it.
Yeah, so I mean, I think one of the key things here is to look at the efficiencies that may well be gained by actually automating the process. So you have your initial capital investment, but at the same time, if you can take a process that's going to save you significant time or resources once it's actually been automated, then quite quickly that cost can be negated. Actually, you know, a few processes or even a single process might well remove that fear or anxiety around spending the money or having the budget available.
Yeah, certainly from our experience, savings are pretty much guaranteed. So when you automate a process, you're looking at typically a 50% plus efficiency boost. And one of the things we found as well is that don't just think about one process. On one process, you'll have an efficiency boost of whatever you get. You maybe get 30, you get 50, you get 70, whatever it is. But the thing to do is to automate lots of processes because it really adds up. And if you automate 10 or 20 processes, the savings become really, really very significant. And I think what's interesting as well, and James, you might have had some experience with this too, is sometimes you get really lucky. Like if you automate 20 or 50, let's say, processes, there'll be 1 or 2 or 3 of them in there that give you really surprising benefits. Like you can really get massive efficiency boosts. It's like a little bit like winning the lottery. And you'll never know up front, I guess, what those processes will be. But as you go and you digitize them, you'll find a whole new way of working that you never realized before and suddenly get a massive efficiency boost. And the thing there is, like, you'll find those processes if you digitize at scale. What does that mean? That you don't just do one, you do many. And what you find is all those savings accumulate up to really a very large number at the end of the day, because they have all sorts of spin-off benefits, like having all that data that you collect to do the analytics, and using the analytics, you can really become much more agile with the way you work in the business. So there's all sorts of spin-off benefits as well. And as I said, they all add up. So it's becoming easier and easier to put together a business case for digitalization in construction. And there's lots of people now who have done it and done it successfully, you know.
Yeah, I suppose just to enforce that point, I suppose, Paul, as well. I mean, when we first, it took us some time to actually select a product, but once we had one, we went from starting with, I think it was 2 or 3 processes, and then it really grew arms and legs and gained momentum. And I think within 18 months, we were over 50 odd processes, all of which we were doing efficiency studies against. And like you say, some of them are real eye openers in terms of the value that drive from them. Others, you know, you're just increasing efficiency in terms of data capture, and it's maybe a marginal gain, but as a collective, it's quite powerful.
That's really good to hear. Yeah, I think that second one, just a quick thing there on the perceived lack of skills, for sure. With you know, with older kind of systems, you would have to be dependent on IT skills. We kind of already referred to this, but it's actually very easy to skill up on a no-code system. Like I can say from FlowForma's perspective, we have an onboarding program which actually trains you up to become self-sufficient very quickly. So within the space of a few weeks, you're building your own solutions. So while there is a perceived lack of skills, and we understand that, it's quite easy with these no-code systems to skill up. You don't have to have any IT skills at all to be able to do this. And also, with a system like FlowForma, it's designed so that it's easy for business users, the site workers, so that we've developed kind of an interface that's very friendly, quick to understand, and so that people can adopt it quickly. Because at the end of the day, you might configure the best solution ever, but you know what? If it's not adopted by your site workers, then it's not adding any value to your business. So we've specifically addressed that problem. We've got case studies that show that you know, the adoption can be we have an approach to adoption, and adoption can be done very easily, even in construction, where, you know, the digital skill set out there on the site may not be the strongest. You know, we designed a system that's really easy to access and get up and running, and and start getting that ROI from.
And I think, Paul, what you were saying earlier on relates back to one of the earlier slides where we're looking at 86% in terms of drive for Office 365 and so forth. The familiarization between the likes of FlowForma and Office 365, it's not a massive step change. It's quite familiar to an end user nowadays compared to something a few years ago where, like you say, would require a lot more skills. They're more used to working in that kind of environment with those bits of software.
That's really interesting, actually. That's a really interesting observation, because again, it ties back to that those adoption rates, 90% and 86% of the Office platform, and it's absolutely the case. It's all being driven, I guess, by the pandemic and also competitiveness within the industry. But absolutely, people are changing the way they work at an increasingly rapid pace, and they are becoming very digitally aware. So yeah, it's really changing in the industry right now. I guess, which leads on to the third point there, which is quite a surprise. So 16% think that it's not a priority to digitize in construction. And certainly from our experience working with players in the industry, there is a big push towards construction, towards digitization right now. And if you're not digitizing, I think you're going to fall behind. And it's a very competitive industry, as we know, and we've seen evidence of clients going for people who adopted a digital strategy against people who have not. Now, I know, James, you have a lot more industry experience than I do, so what thoughts would you have on that one?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely spot on there, Paul. If you look at tenders nowadays, there's normally an innovation or technology piece contained within those tenders. It's quite key to most people for part of their engagement with their supply chain now. I suppose my kind of running mantra is also around data. So it may not be within an organization's own internal businesses, but to be able to service their clients and their supply chain in a kind of better manner makes a lot more sense. And it's becoming more and more of a prerequisite now, I think, for engaging with other entities and other companies.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think for those that don't see it as a priority, I think over time, if we were to do the same survey within a 6-12 month time frame, I think that would be a much lower number. Because certainly in our experience is that people are becoming aware that digitization is important and something that they need to be doing. So with that, let me just talk a little bit about recommended next steps. So if you wanted to digitize today, how would you go about it? Well, we have some general guidelines here. I'll start off with the first one, which is start with the obvious. So if you want to digitize and you want to maybe convince your management that you need to digitize and it's going to bring benefits, then what you would do is start with the obvious. So pick a process that's obviously going to add value to the business if it was digitized, and then digitize it and launch it quickly. And using tools such as FlowForma, you have the ability to do that. You have the ability to put a process together in as little as a couple of weeks and get it out there, get it launched, and start getting that ROI and measure it, because you're getting all the data, remember? So you can actually measure the performance of those processes that you've launched. So so that would be a key thing for us. So start with the obvious, the pain point that everybody knows, and then attack that. And get a solution together quickly, get it out there, get people using it, and then measure the results that you get. And then, of course, that maximizes your existing investment as well, because at least with FlowForma, it operates on that Office 365 platform. You've already invested in that. This is a way of getting more return on your investment in Office 365. The next point is an interesting one, because you need to find a champion for digitization in your business. So what that means is you've got to find somebody who's bought into the whole idea and somebody who's going to promote digitalization within your organization. I don't know, James, would you have any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's key, Paul. I mean, very much when we've looked at this previously, it's been a bit like you said, pick the low-hanging fruit, pick the ones that are going to give you the quick wins. But I think it's essential. With a lot of these things, it can't be perceived as being something that's enforced on people or delivered by IT. You need the people in the business that have the knowledge of the business and how it's going to operate and how it wants to operate to help drive these things forward. That's certainly, you know, when we've looked at this previously and we've done this sort of work, it's find those people that are key influencers within the business that, you know, I suppose a little bit of excitement around it. Certainly some of the people I've dealt with previously in the procurement space, you know, why do they want to be clipping pieces of paper and sticking them in lever arch files for 3 years? You know, it's they get quite excited by doing this and actually having the power to make a change.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've seen that as well, not just in the construction industry, and others as well, that the speed at which you can deliver solutions of FlowForma is really surprising. And a lot of people who see it in action really get enthusiastic about it. So it's not too difficult to get people enthusiastic about it. You just need that champion there to kind of literally champion a cause and say, hey, you know what, digitalization is something you really need to look at. And what we'd say then is, you know, focus on adoption rates, so that trying to get the system adopted by the end users and, you know, get the system in front of those end users as quickly as possible. And when they reply to you and say, oh, you know what, we don't like this, we don't like that, can you change this, can you change that, engage with them and adapt, you know, listen to them, make the changes, get it back out there again, so that they can see that you're responding and responding quickly, so that they actually start to use the system, because that's when you get the return. Once they're using the system, you're seeing the benefits, and that leads on to more support for further digitization within your business.
Yeah, I was just going to say on that point, Paul, I mean, I've certainly had some workshops previously where we've sat down with a collection of people, a few people keen on digitizing the process, and within the space of an hour and a half, 2 hours, you know, walked out of the room with a bare bones process that, okay, it's not the polished and finished article, but it's certainly a lot further forward than you would be if you were in a more traditional coding space, and they have a good idea of what the output's going to be.
Yeah, and it helps them understand what digitalization means, because if they're used to working with paper and so on, to have that first cut really gives them an understanding of what going digital means. You know, like what does a digital form look like? How does it behave? How is it going to be used? How do you pass information digitally between people on a site? You know, all that basic stuff. But a quick draft, they get that basic understanding, and that helps them move forward. So yeah, I think you know, it's important to get the systems out there in the hands of the end users as fast as possible, and get their feedback and update the system as quickly as you can. And because it's new, by the way, because this digital technology, digital forms technology is new to a lot of people, here at FlowForma we offer this ability to try before you buy. So you can actually, you know, engage with us, and we'll build out a small proof of concept for you, and then give you access to it. You can go out and try it out yourselves, and that's all to do with that mantra of, you know, engaging, focus on adoption rates, engage and adapt, get the system in the hands of the people that are going to use it, and find out what the reaction is. So we support that with this try before you buy approach, where you can start up a trial, you can try it out, see what you think, see is it making a difference, is it what you're expecting, so on. So just in terms of the FlowForma system and who it's used by, and it's used by a large number of businesses across the world in lots of different sectors. But what we've done is we've put more focus on the construction sector, because right now we feel that there is a real wave happening in construction towards digitization. We've got quite a lot of clients in construction. There's just a few of the clients here listed, like NG Bailey, the A14, very large highways projects. Inland Rail is a very large rail project in Australia. Maverick is a US company, and Reliable Contractors you may be familiar with as a resourcing company in the UK. So really a quite diverse list just there of kind of different construction companies in different sectors within construction. But what we're finding is one common tract across all these companies is they're very paper-based. They have got very many paper-based processes, that there's a real need for digitization. And what we're finding is a big response in construction right now to that need. So we're fulfilling that need, and we've got lots of success stories and so on that we can discuss with you should you like to get in contact with us. So at that point, maybe we go on to some Q&A, and myself and James will be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thanks, gents. Plenty of food for thought, I think. Okay, first up, how do you prioritize your processes for automation?
Yeah, if I kick off on that one, maybe it's interesting. I think the thing to do is you need to focus on trying getting some adoption early on so that you can get early return on investment. So very often in companies, there are processes that people just know that, hey, if this was digital, it would be so much better. So there's very often an obvious candidate for digitization in the company, and it's known typically by everyone in the company or by many people in the company. So that would be the first place to start. And then as you implement the process, you get it adopted, you build up that momentum for change, and then you'll get candidates being fed back into you from your business, and you can assess those candidates based on the expected return on investment. You can also bring in political factors, like you might want to influence procurement sooner rather than later, so you might focus on those guys. But getting the first one out there and getting success with the first one is the most critical thing. And after that, I think it's relatively easy to prioritize once that's successful. Now, James, I don't know, from some real world experiences you might have done some things slightly differently. How about that?
No, I mean, I would go with what you said there, Paul. I mean, certainly previous experience, I've been involved where we've known a number of processes we want to automate from day one, but steered clear of some of the more complex ones, I suppose, to start with. So to your point, it's about, getting that knowledge out there, giving people an understanding of what it means for process automation by starting with some of the easier ones, some of the quicker ones, and then moved on to, far more, what I would think to be very complex processes at a later date once we've had the initial success and we've got the adoption and the messages out there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you very much, gents. Time for our next question, I think. How do you motivate staff to start digitizing?
I'll just jump in on that one actually quickly, Paul. So I think that goes back to my earlier point around the fact that if they can see there's a benefit to them in terms of what they're doing on a day-to-day in their day-to-day job. One of the things I've found previously is that giving them the power to actually have a bit more control of a process and understand what benefits and what efficiencies they can pull out of it. And I think that makes quite a difference to the adoption and where the uptake on these sort of systems. You got anything to add on that, Paul?
Yeah, no, I certainly think you're right there, James. Giving people the power to change is a fantastic motivator. So if you can actually quickly demonstrate, how a digital process works, and then give them the ability to go and change and modify it themselves, it certainly has a big impact. They feel a bit of ownership over it all, and they say, okay, well, actually, that's my process now, and I'm responsible for it, and I'm responsible for making it as good as it can be, and that they can really welcome that. So yeah, I think that's a great way to get them enthusiastic and get them to take some ownership and build the processes to the best level they can. So yeah, absolutely, we'll go along with that, James.
Perfect. I think we've time for one more, really timely, this one. What tips do you have for improving productivity and communication across a distributed workforce?
Yeah, so if I take that to begin with, the thing to do is to, you can digitize processes that can span the whole organization. So with a digital system, you can assign different steps in the process to any resource, across the organization. So you can start a process maybe on site, it passes into head office, goes back out on site again, maybe goes out to a supplier, comes back to the site worker. So you can really digital processes no bounds almost. You can have different people involved in the processes at different stages, any resource within your organization. So it's having that broader kind of thought process of saying, okay, well, who are all the people involved? Who are all the resources involved? Where are they? And can they access the system? Yes, they can. That's no problem. You don't need to think about anything more than that, because all of that process is a process can start somewhere and finish somewhere else. There's no restraints there. So what I'd say to almost is like, you just need to, if you broaden your mind and think that any digital process can operate across the entire organization, then you can design the process any way you like using a digital tool to do that. James, I don't know if you'd have any thoughts on that one.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose the bit I'd add to that, slightly different spin on it, I suppose, Paul, is around, if you're looking at productivity, to measure productivity, you need some form of data and you need a baseline. So digitizing, obviously, you start to collect that data, you can start to get some more informed measures around where you are. And it may be you digitize the process, take it from the paper to digital. And you enhance it further once you've got it in digital, because then you have some measures that you can use against your productivity. Whereas previously in a paper-based world, it's very difficult to achieve.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, of course, you wouldn't be able to measure necessarily your productivity if you're just running off paper all the time. And digitizing it gives you the ability to measure your productivity and track it against baselines, and of course improve it over time. Like, you continuously improve your processes as your resource pool changes and your projects change and so on. You can change your processes and make them more efficient, because now you can measure them. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you very much, gents. And I think that's all we've got time for. If we didn't get to your question, a member of the team will reach out to you following the webinar. It just remains for me to thank our speakers for taking part and all the members of the audience for joining us today. I hope you found this session useful. If you'd like to see the full report, you can download it from your resource panel. I'd also recommend you book a live demo or request a free trial of FlowForma at www.flowforma.com/trial. Thank you to Paul and James. You'll see a short survey at the end, and we'd appreciate if you could fill this out. A link to the full recording will be sent to you all shortly. Please feel free to share this with anyone you think might be interested. Thanks once again. We look forward to welcoming you to our next webinar. Have a great rest of the day.